Hey everyone, this is Corine La Font, your favorite radio host, your only radio host and favorite girl, of course. Broadcasting to you from the lovely island. I'm hearing some feedback, so I'm going to just mute those who are. Can you mute yourself if you don't mind? I'm muting you. Beautiful. Yes, so let me start over that again. So this is Corine La Font, your favorite radio host, your only radio host and favorite girl, of course, broadcasting to you from the lovely island of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean on Between the Lines. And you know how we do it here on Between the Lines, always with gratitude, always with thankfulness. Some people may interchange the terms, but it's all leading in the same direction. It's a beautiful day here in Trinidad and Tobago. Rain or not, it's beautiful. It's overcast. I can still see outside. And we had a lot of rain this morning. I actually cuddled up with my pillow and my comforter, snuggled up. Yes, it was nice. Just hearing the rain pouring on the rooftop and the thunder and everything. It was awesome. A lot of people all over the world would like to have that. Yes? So I am thankful. You are seeing a lot of people with me today, right? A lot of people with me today. Fortunately, the woman is to my right. To my right. And the men are accompanying us today. And normally I would have one guest because I'm between the lines. I would normally have one guest with me, but I have three people because I am honoring Mental Health Month. This month, May, and I think normally every year in May is Mental Health Month. And I decided to do something differently today. I do this every now and again. And so I want to introduce to you our guest. I'm going to start off with Dr. Deer. I'm going to be reading the bios. So Dr. Ainsley Deer is a Jamaican psychologist and international management consultant with over 30 years experience in his field. Companies and associates in several countries have benefited from his business acumen, having conducted major assignments for several leading client organizations in the private and public sector locally and regionally. He is the CEO and co-founder of Training Dynamics and Consultants Limited. And in addition to his MPhil and PhD in occupational and clinical psychology, he also holds a master's degree in medical parasitology and a bachelor's degree in biology from Salford University. And of course, if you check the description, you will see how you can reach Ainsley. We're on a first name basis here. Okay, and I'm also going to be sharing his contact information a little bit later down. We move quickly to Anthony Gemot. He's Trinidadian as well, well, I take Ainsley as Trinidadian. That's why I said as well, yes. So Anthony Gemot is a Trinidadian who emigrated to the UK 30 plus years ago. He is a registered psychiatric nurse with a BSc honors in medical biochemistry, advanced diploma family focused interventions, and a professional graduate certificate in post compulsory education. Yes, I read that right. He is qualified as a registered nurse and mental health in 2001 from St. Bartholomew School of Nursing and Midwifery, City University. Again, I will put his contact information a little bit later down in the show. And finally, we have Marcia Celestin. She's the holder of a master's degree in family therapy from King's College Institute of Psychiatry, London, and a bachelor's degree in social work from the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica. She worked in the social work sector for 10 years before emigrating to the UK in 1998. She's the director of NIC, International Consultancy Services. She's a qualified couples, family, and systemic psychotherapist, systemic supervisor, and social worker. With over 30 years of experience working in the Caribbean and the UK, Ms. Celestin has worked with statutory services and in private practice. She has also provided EAP and employee well-being services to local, public sector, and private organizations. And again, her information will be shared a little bit later down in the show. Welcome to everyone. You can unmute yourselves. Let me see if I can do it. Wonderful. I was hearing a bit of background noise. Somebody probably has a speaker. So if there's a bit of that, you can probably mute yourself when the other speakers are speaking. So today we're talking mental health awareness. And let me set the context in which we're going to be discussing this. Mental health seemed to have raised to prominence during the pandemic. Okay? Why was that the case? Because we were in isolation and a lot of latent issues came to the fore. I want people to know this might be a shock. This might be a shock. But mental health was around before the pandemic. Okay? My guest experts might be able to tell me if it's so or not, but it might be a shock to our listeners that mental health was around before the pandemic. Okay? So I don't want people to think who are listening and watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And to all my listeners and watchers, feel free to comment, put your questions in. It's going to be answered live by our expert panelists today, and it's going to show up at the bottom of the screen. So it was around, but the pandemic brought it to the fore. And what we're going to be doing today, if you notice when I read the bio, Dr. Dale Ainsley, he is with workforce, more workforce. So we're going to be coming from the perspective from the workforce with Ainsley. We're coming from family, couples, children with Marcia. And we're coming from a medical perspective, nursing practitioner, what he sees on the floor out there from Anthony. So we're getting a nice little 360 approach. We're also going to be, if we have time, touch on, in terms of the Black community, how are we treating with it? What's happening within the Black community? If we can bring in that perspective as well. We're going to be here for an hour. It's going to be tight. It's going to be eventful. It's going to be impactful. And you're going to see me showing different views of my guests, solo, as well as this viewer that you're seeing here now. And so I'm going to be manipulating all that and moderating the session. Okay? Questions are going to be asked. You can decide who you want as watchers and listeners, who you want to answer the question specifically, or we can throw the question out to the floor and anybody can take it. Let me just take a quick look. I see a comment here. So we have at least one person watching and listening to us. That's Lisa Dorman. Thank you so much, Lisa, for listening and watching. Feel free to ask your questions to any of our guest panelists or even me. Okay? But it's all about the guests today. So thank you so much for being here. So the context, people, let me ask a question starting with Ainsley. And I'm going to ask the same question coming around to Marcia and Anthony. Now, what have you been seeing as the top 3 issues or challenges? This is not specifically for the pandemic, Ainsley. What have been the top 3 issues or challenges you're seeing in terms of mental health within the workforce?
Okay. Thank you for your question. Let me start off by saying that the seemingly never-ending pandemic, seemingly never-ending, it has affected all aspects of the workplace, but in particular, employee mental health and well-being, in particular. So it's not unusual, for example, to encounter cases of pandemic anxiety where people are stressed out. There's anxiety and depression associated with COVID 19. I've had people, for example, who express their fear of death. All of this, came about as a result of COVID 19. You know, so we also have containment fatigue, where people are tired of being locked down, and that has also affected them. Um, you have sources of stress from fears of infection and long isolation, uh, frustration and boredom, something that we call isolation and quarantine distress. And then another aspect of all of this is, of course, catastrophic thinking, where people are contemplating about, you know, uh, irrational worst case scenarios. Um, in addition to all of that, you have compassion fatigue and burnout, where people become less compassionate in order to deal with their own issues and to be able to treat their patients or clients, um, in order to protect themselves, in other words. You have this happening. So, employee mental health and well being has been profoundly impacted by the pandemic. Now, something else that I've also noticed is that new mental health concerns, coupled with pre existing mental health concerns, are exacerbated by three things: one, the pandemic; two, remote work; and three, returning to the workplace. For example, people are overwhelmed with the anxiety at the prospect of returning to the office after working from home for 2 years. So, all of these things are affecting people. Now, another observation that was also very, very, very clear to me is the fact that people with pre existing conditions, anxiety disorder, for example, OCD, and PTSD, they find it more difficult to manage the disruptions caused by COVID 19. So the question is, what can we do to address the mental health crisis to positively impact the lives of persons in the workforce? And I stop there.
Lovely, lovely. Marcia, let's come to you because we're hearing the human aspect coming from Ainsley. Yes, because it's humans that are going out to the workforce. Are you seeing that similar sort of condition manifestation happening going out into the workforce from a family perspective?
Yes, I mean, people's lives have been disrupted by the pandemic. The home became the place where you worked, where you were educated, where you had your recreation. The whole idea that you would leave home to go to school or you would leave home to go to work, that was, thrown into a disarray.
Mm.
So that you find that parents felt that they couldn't catch a break, really. They couldn't get a break from the idea of having to be parenting. However, in addition to the parenting, they also had to be the teacher. They had to be the comforter. They had to be the one who was keeping the children active, keeping them amused, having to deal with relationship stress. I mean, I've had couples, many couples who approached me for therapeutic help. Um, where the issues, as Ainsley pointed out, the pre-existing issues were exacerbated because people were living in such close quarters. They didn't have the opportunity to get up, dress themselves, leave the house, go to work, maybe have a bit of a, as the Brits will say, have a bit of a natter with their colleague, you know, to be able to express themselves with a good friend, you know, in person, and let them know how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So that brought its own level of stress to the family circle. You know, the children couldn't go out, children who were involved in professional sports, that was curtailed. Some children have even missed opportunities in terms of advancing their careers, or even as professional athletes. You know, they couldn't go out to practice. They might have missed a window or an opportunity where they could have been noticed by a scout. You know, so they were 15 when the pandemic started, and now they're 17 going on 18. And they feel as if, well, some things have passed them by. And really and truly, a lot of what families have had to deal with is the culmination of a lot of loss. You know, of course, there were loss of jobs, which Ainsley would be, you know, encountering. There were loss of jobs, you know, but there were loss of friendships. Children who, especially teenagers and the younger ones, who had been accustomed to, you know, meeting their friends in the playground. You know, I had one mother tell me that her daughter is having difficulty readjusting, you know, to her friendship groups, and feeling a bit left out because you know, the playground dynamic could be a bit volatile at times, you know, and I don't know if Ainsley's seeing this in Jamaica, but in Trinidad, and I think I've heard in Bahamas, there's been loads of issues around school violence and school fights. And things like that. Children are now coming back and having to adjust to being together, being able to empathize with each other, you know, listen to each other, manage their emotions, and somehow it isn't quite working for them.
Wow. Wow. Anthony, thank you so much for that, Marcia. So you see some synergies happening between the two areas. Anthony, what's happening on a medical front? Tell us.
Yes, I thanks very much. I think it's very similar to what has been said already. What I have noticed is that there is a lot of anxiety in terms of being able to interact with people again, people actually coming out to return to their work, to return to their lives of the pre-pandemic state. People find that they have sort of lost those social skills. It's like they have to relearn it again. And that sense of purpose and identity. And Marcia sort of touched on it there, and so did Ainsley, in terms of that sense of purpose. It's like almost that people need to redefine or refine their sense of purpose and identity in life. This is what I am seeing. And I think we are now seeing the impact of the pandemic. People are now starting to come out of the woodwork in terms of the impact that had on their lives. However, I would also say what I have noticed is this, and I don't know if people have heard the term post-traumatic growth. So people have
post-traumatic growth, you said?
Growth.
I thought you were heading down the road of post-traumatic stress, but you're saying post-traumatic growth.
It's the new psychology that came out of all this stuff.
Tell us, enlighten us.
People in when people experience any trauma, and definitely this has been traumatic globally, wherever you are, in terms of the pandemic and what people had to experience. People do grow in that moment of when there is that trauma, people do you, and you wouldn't see it. You may not see it and be able to recognize it because you are so immersed within the trauma. But there is some degree of growth. And
Yes.
this came about with the NHS looking to see how they manage this, where they reached out to the army to look and see how they cope with this, because there are organizations that go to war, they're in war zones, you've seen death. Remember, the health services haven't seen anything like this for a long time. So they reached out to see how do they cope with that and what we can learn. And this whole thing of post-traumatic growth came up. And I think it's important to also think of that. And I'm not trying to dismiss the trauma and all the stuff that have been mentioned, but also that people do develop. And because the human being is very resilient.
Exactly.
Let's not forget that.
Exactly
There's a
so,
degree of
Anthony.
Oh,
resilience.
Corinne,
Yes, yes,
just
Ainsley.
to address this one to Anthony. So, would you say, Anthony, that we're dealing with a kind of new phenomenon that involves psychologically the survival of the fittest?
Well,
Because not everybody will grow in an
no.
environment like this, but it's a matter of if you're psychologically resilient,
Right.
then
Yeah.
you're more likely to survive and actually grow from the experience than if you're otherwise affected.
Yes, yes, and as you would know as a psychologist, this is not new. This is how mankind have existed and survived from generations. That whole theory of the survival of the fittest,
Yes.
and obviously, if there were no preconditions, in terms of your mental health, because as correctly said earlier on, that this has exacerbated underlying conditions that may have been there already. And you correctly said it earlier on that mental health has always been there.
Right.
We have lived with that and, always. But this whole thing of the COVID and the pandemic has actually highlighted, exacerbated, exposed that more, makes us more vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I agree with you in terms of what you said there, Ainsley, in terms of that whole thing of that resilience, that survival, because as you correctly said, not everyone would have grown.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I like the direction you have taken it, Anthony, because I don't want us to just focus on the negatives. We're not trying to ignore it. We're not trying to dismiss it or make it smaller. But we need to focus on the positives. What have we learned from this? How can we move forward? What do we need in the respective areas that you belong to help us to keep moving forward, to be more resilient? Human beings are resilient beings. That's how we are built. And we don't know, the funny thing about it, we don't know until we are pushed against, our backs are against the wall. When we are comfortable, we have been comfortable pre-pandemic, and something happened to throw a spanner in the mix. And now we are forced to either give up or move forward. That's where the resilience came in. Who survived. Who didn't, sorry for them. that's just what it is. Who decide to put their head down in the sand, sorry for them. The cream rose to the top, kind of a thing, and moved on. But I want us to focus on the solutions. I want us to focus on the growth. And I don't know if people are really looking within themselves to say, I have really become better, a better person. I've become stronger. I've learned to do things differently. So, for example, a basic thing, I'm just throwing this in, a basic thing. We would go, like for us in Trinidad, San Fernando or Port of Spain, and shop every day, or go out San Fernando every day. You have no main reason, you just probably may go. But because of the pandemic, you had to structure your time and become more efficient in the way you go shopping. There were certain countries even within, I can't remember which country it was that I was speaking to someone, and they had to only go out on particular days. I think it was in the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. They could only shop on certain days. And they were so regulated that there were the armed forces out there. They had watching their license plate, because I think they go according to license plate. Only certain license plate could have driven on the road at a particular time, and they could have shopped at a particular time and come out. So they had to organize themselves. So pre-pandemic, you were all over the place. Now you had to become more efficient and effective with your time. Just a basic, simple thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts on that. Marcia, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it did force us to reevaluate. And as you said, people had to become more disciplined about, and they had to be able to self-manage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the all of us experience fatigue, as Ainsley pointed out. We, all of us have become sick to the back tooth of this whole pandemic thing. You know what I mean? And now we're hearing monkeypox.
Oh my God.
We can't take the next one. No monkeypox. We ain't able to, no, we don't want another one. But anyway. but anyway.
We can't even get over COVID. We have monkeypox on our back. Literally.
No, we
monkey.
ain't monkeypox. We ain't with that one. No. Keep that one. And so, but then again, we are forced to adjust.
Of course.
And I think those of us, again, with the whole stress vulnerability model of mental health, where there were people who would have been vulnerable prior, and the stress of COVID made them even more vulnerable. Yeah, and you can't get away from that. However, I mean, even in the business world, the whole concept of pivoting emerged. We have to pivot. We have to do things differently. We have to make ourselves relevant. I mean, yes. I saw places that was just, or even supermarkets, not supermarkets, sorry. Yeah, supermarkets as well as pharmacies became the place where you could go and you could pop in and get almost anything. They were selling prepackaged food for people who don't like to cook. They were selling, just about anything. If you ran out of the bread and milk, they were selling the bread and milk.
Hold on, let me add to that. You could WhatsApp your list. Hello, please.
WhatsApp
your list, and it delivered at your door, yes. Marcia. What happened to you?
Of course.
I don't have to go to the supermarket.
Yeah, so we became more efficient. We learned to do things differently. We had a change of behavior, and there are some things that will never return to how they used to be. And, even in terms of families, particularly in terms of families, one of the things I always advocate is that parents need to be attuned to their children's needs.
Yes.
Children may not necessarily come out and tell you, this is hurting me, but you have to be able to recognize something is not right.
How, Marcia? Yeah. What are some of the signs? Share some of those with us.
Well, okay, you see a child, losing interest in social activities. Of course, during the pandemic, they were curtailed in terms of not being able to go out, meet friends, that kind of thing. But then if you see your child constantly in bed, keeping irregular hours, there's no routine at all in their life. The school is contacting you and saying, he hasn't logged on since last week. We haven't seen him. There may be eating problems. Eating problems could emerge. You find that they either eating less or eating way more.
I think it was way more.
Or they start to sound, very hopeless. You start to detect, the conversation is about, oh, I don't feel it makes sense. Don't want to be here anymore.
Catastrophic thinking.
Yes, that
Catastrophic
kind of
thinking.
It's
catastrophic.
really what it
Yeah,
is.
thinking.
Yeah.
No,
But
I don't need to
Thinking
be
of the
here.
worst case
case
scenarios.
scenario. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
that's
typical human being. The worst case. This is gone. And what
no.
if?
But
And what
the
if?
thing about it, if you see that, especially in a child, you have to sit up and take
But
notice.
we're too busy, Marcia. What
Well,
you talking?
that's
We're
what I'm
too
saying.
busy. We
That's
were
what I'm
busy
saying.
pre-pandemic. Yeah,
Parents
and
need to be attuned. And again, Anthony talked about post-traumatic growth. I would have hoped that an opportunity would have been created for parents to be able to get closer to their children.
I thought,
I,
but
I
instead they want to kill each other.
well, I would think that it probably happened in some instances.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's I mean, correctly as you said, Marcia, there are some things that would have changed forever with
Yeah.
this pandemic. And I know some people, I was speaking to someone the other day, and what they said was that they will never go back to renting an office space again.
Well,
All their work they will be doing will be remotely now,
Oh
because
yeah.
they realize that they do not need that office space, and they will be saving about 60K a year,
Yeah.
for their company. So they would not be renting that space again.
Not
One of
only
the things,
that, not only that, Anthony. I don't need to see Marcia, Ainsley, and Anthony every day. Eh?
yeah,
Well,
I
that
don't
that
need.
create and maybe Ainsley could speak to this, but that creates its own issues.
of course,
Ainsley, jump in here. What issues? If I don't want to see you and Marcia and Anthony every day,
Yeah.
I don't want to see you in office every day. Beat up with the traffic, hustle. What is the problem? I want to work from home, remote in my own little space. I good.
Well, that's good, and you might even be very productive doing that. But there's also the question of the social interaction, which I think a lot of children, they have that problem because they're not, their social skills are not facilitated when they can't interact with each other, as I think Anthony was pointing out. And the same thing happens with adults. We need to rub shoulders with each other, maybe not every day, but fairly frequently.
Yeah.
But the question really that I left with you earlier on was, what can we do to impact the workforce positively
Exactly.
as a result of all of this? And there are two things that I recognize. One of them
Yeah.
is we need to as companies, equip ourselves with the tools necessary to navigate employees' requests for accommodation, because they're going to be coming to us now. Can we work from home? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can we reduce the workload? We have to navigate around the request for accommodation related to mental health conditions. And secondly, we have to help address the situations where employees are struggling, and some of them are indeed struggling to perform their jobs because of mental health conditions. So this is something that we need to focus on. I mean, we have to make certain that we remove the stigma associated with mental health issues, because there is a stigma there and people are afraid very often to speak up. So we have to remove that stigma. You also have to know your culture. Does your culture support employee mental health? Because there are some companies that mental health, we're not interested in that. you know
That's
you,
the thing.
yeah, you have to make employees feel more comfortable when they're seeking accommodation. um, you have to audit your company. I mean, are they the kind of company that will invest in EAP programs, for example? Some companies, no, not realizing that nobody loses from investing in an EAP program, because it is said that for every dollar that is invested in an EAP program, depending on how efficiently it is run, you are likely to earn between $5 and $17. So it's an investment that brings guaranteed returns, and it's not a cost in real terms. to the organization, but some people tend to see it that way. And so, I think one of the most important factors in all of this is that we have to learn to nurture our employees. And this is what a lot of managers have not been doing. I mean, they can manage, they know how to get people to come to work on time, they know how to penalize them if they're late 5 times of the week.
Yeah.
They know what to do if they're caught smoking weed on the job, or if they're
That's what management is about, Ainsley.
well, a lot of managers, that is how they manage. But when it
Oh,
comes to nurturing, that is where a lot of us fall down.
Mhm.
Forgetting completely that when you nurture, you motivate people. When you motivate people, they become more engaged.
that makes people soft, Ainsley. You're telling managers to be soft, nurture, love,
Nurture, yes,
empathy,
because
compassion.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
sweetie. No,
absolutely.
sweetie. No,
So
no.
you nurture them, and they become more engaged, and by virtue of becoming more engaged, then that's where they get job satisfaction. And as a result of job satisfaction, they get improved productivity. So if you want your company to be prosperous, nurture your staff, treat them with compassion and empathy rather than simply holding a big stick over their head.
Anthony, jump in here.
Yeah.
The big stick syndrome. Come,
Well,
support me.
I
To be a
un,
leader, you have to be,
Mm.
un,
fist.
unfortunately I can't support you with that one. The research, the evidence base has shown that compassionate leadership, and I think that's what Ainsley is talking about, the compassionate leadership
That's right.
is
That's right.
what brings about the rewards, both for the individual and your companies. Because I think sometimes people get confused with management, leadership. I think people think that this is about a position, in that once you get a position or a title,
Mhm.
you effectively become a good leader. Leadership is about behavior.
Mhm.
Yeah. Forget about the position, because you within your company you would find that the cleaner may be the most effective leader. Yeah. Because they have that compassion
Compassion.
towards
Mhm.
each other. So it's about compassionate leadership. And Ainsley touched on some of the things, being authentic. Authenticity is one of the things that makes
Yes.
good leaders. Being yourself. But in
Mhm.
order sometimes for these things to take place, you must have the appropriate environment created.
The
That a
culture.
safe
Yes.
space. Yes, you talk about the culture
Mm-hmm.
of
Mhm.
organizations must create that safe space for people to feel comfortable in order to talk about mental health. Yeah, you
Mhm.
have to create that space, because if you don't, people would keep it to themselves. We know that in terms of when people go off sick, how that impacts on productivity for any company, anywhere. So it pays actually to be proactive and
Mm-hmm.
invest in your workers in order to bring about more productivity for everyone, really. But I think,
Marcia,
yeah.
Mhm.
Marcia, you need to support me. You need to support me because it's too
Well,
many and not supporting me.
well,
I am saying
mhm.
we now getting around the diversity and inclusiveness, okay,
Mhm.
in the workplace. And
Inclusion,
you
yeah.
come in to push this whole agenda about compassion, empathy. That's soft. That's not what we were trained in the books, the
Well,
management
at
books.
the end of the day, if you were employing robots, you could probably use that strategy. But because you're working with human beings who are dynamic beings and who have a whole lot that's going on for them, because you remember too, and I used to say this to teachers or education leaders
Mhm.
when I did school-based work in the UK. You can't ask the child to separate him or herself from what is going on in their home environment. This is a child who is coming to you in the morning, who might have been up all night because their mother is the community drug pusher. No, really. That's a real story. That's real. Yeah.
I don't
So
mean to laugh, but Marcia, you see why I bring you on here? You always training these
I'm
things.
telling you, it's as real as I can tell you. Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's real. You know, and every 5 minutes there's a knock on the door, and the door is open. How does this child, you know, sleep well during the night and come to school prepared to learn? It ain't happening. So you can't ask the child, okay, so mom and dad had a fight last night, you know? And as one child told a teacher, yeah, my mom couldn't come to the parent evening because dad threw the television at her. And that's normal. No, normal.
Normal. That's normal.
That's normal. But then you ask this child to come to school in the morning and be respectful to you as the teacher, and they are witnessing violence. How does that work? Or you are asking that mother who had the television thrown at her to get up and go to work in the morning and be able to perform to the optimum. How does that work? It can't work. It doesn't work. You know, this is a human being at the end of the day, and there are loads of things that probably are hidden from you, the employer, the manager.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice your employee is not performing, you have to be genuinely curious to find out what help is required.
Yeah.
Marcia, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there because none of y'all supported me. Here's the thing. You're working for someone. You're management, but there's somebody above you who is putting pressure on you. So you are now under pressure to get the staff to perform. I am so with you on the compassion and the empathy. Yeah. Really, I truly am. But how do we get persons to remove the stigma, to be more empathetic, to be more compassionate? All what you're saying, because it is true that model can work. And I mean, there are many organizations it works with. Mm-hmm. But when you are under pressure from above, you have to become a different type of person to get your staff to perform, especially when somebody's above you putting pressure on you. Well, where does it start from, Ainsley? Where does it start from?
Then you have to fix the problem from above.
At the top.
Yes, fix the problem from above, because, you know, you find that an organization will take on the personality of the person that sits up top there. So, you know, so you have to fix it from above. I mean, look at the kind of people you're recruiting into the organization.
Exactly.
Look at the kind of culture that you want to advance in your organization. And don't try to fix it from below, but fix it from above. Make certain that the right people, you know, get into the right positions in the first instance.
That's if they know what they want, Ainsley. That's if they know what they want, Marcia and Anthony, because they clearly, if you're saying that, it says to me as intelligent people sitting here that you must know the kind of culture you want, the kind of productivity you want, and find the type of people that will emulate that.
Well, unfortunately,
within the organization, but that's not happening.
Not everybody takes that approach to dealing with the selection of staff. You know, I mean, they have all kinds of criteria, and some people are selected on the basis of their qualifications.
Yeah.
Academic qualifications.
Of course, that has happened to me.
And
the paper.
They're not ready. You know, they're not ready.
But Ainsley, you must know, you've heard people talk about lying on psychometric tests.
Uh-huh. Well, if the test is properly developed and, you know, properly numerically you know, appropriate, then we shouldn't have that problem. You know, good tests don't pose that problem.
Yes.
You know, I have heard people tell me, even people in the profession, and Anthony,
yes,
you still working in the trust that we worked in. People told me they went to the center, the testing center, because they are psychologically minded. They knew how to manipulate that thing.
Answer those questions. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I
they
mean,
knew how to manipulate that thing. So this whole thing about fit,
Yeah.
fit
Yeah.
with the culture, the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some tests have a lie scale, and you can determine to what extent a person might be lying, and that in itself is not good. If you're after a job and it turns out that you're lying in your responses, and that won't be good for you anyway.
Yeah.
I think one of the things is that as you correctly said, Ainsley, is about having that culture change within organizations. Like, this is what brings about the change, and there are many tools, many frameworks I've seen that have worked within teams, within companies. As you correctly said, one of them, I know one of them that I've seen that brought good results. The coaching model, simply having a coaching model within your organization, and having Myers-Briggs also, I've seen that has worked effectively in some places. But as you correctly said, I think it's about having a culture shift. What sometimes impacts on leaders within organization, as you said, the person on the top or the people within the organization usually take on the personality of the person on top. But I would even go further. Sometimes, depending on the administration politically, and I don't want to get political here, you find that senior managers, when they see what's going on there and how behaviors are played out there, it sometimes sort of give people permission to behave that way. Yeah. So if you're looking at it in the systemic context, Marcia, you're looking at that larger system that's out there and how they conduct themselves and the impact that can have on senior managers within companies, influential in terms of how they behave, how they respond.
Now look at it. Go ahead, Marcia. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with Anthony. Of course, we can't shy away from the politics. Anthony and I went through enough cycles of resizing, downsizing, outsizing.
Still going on.
It's after all these years, it's still going.
Re-engineering.
Yeah, re-engineering, reverse engineering. Yes.
All sorts. But in all of these organizations, I think when it comes to mental health, you need to have it. I mean, it would be helpful in any organization if you want to set a new trend. You have to have a champion, and it ought to be, sanctioned by the leadership.
Yes.
When I worked with schools and I, worked with head teachers and deputy heads and heads of departments and things like that, if you didn't have buy-in at the top, you can forget it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing works.
Yeah.
You could come with the best ideas. If you don't get buy-in at the top, forget it.
As we come down to the final quarter, let me call it quarter of the hour, I did mention before that I want to touch on the Black community and what we have been seeing in terms of mental health. And especially, I know people always think about the woman. We just had Mother's Day the other day and Father's Day is coming up. But let's touch on the men in particular, if we can. Let's start with Marcia. What are we seeing?
I think in the Caribbean context, it's so complex. It's a really, really complex situation. I have time for men, so and no. And sometimes when I'm doing my couple work, sometimes women accuse me of siding with the men. But I do have time for men. And I am in the current climate. Men do not have it very easy. I empathize with my sisters, and I am a woman, and I would champion, anything related to women. But I do believe from boyhood to manhood has not become any easier for the Black male.
Yeah.
Because they're really up against it.
Yeah. I
They
don't think there are
really,
outlets for them to air because there's this whole programming that men are not supposed to cry, men are not supposed to show that soft side, they're
yeah,
not supposed to be vulnerable. I don't
yeah.
know. Ainsley, you're the psychologist here in the room. Jump in here. You're a man too,
Yeah,
right?
I think also, that, I mean, men are having a difficult time because so much is expected of us, really.
Mhm.
And sometimes we can't deliver. I mean, in the police force, for example, you find that there's a lot of suicides and things like that because of
Wow.
this expectation. You're supposed to be strong. You're a law officer, a law enforcement officer, and you're supposed to be strong, and you shouldn't have problems like those people over there.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you find that that is so. But I think also, apart from the way that women are made up, and they are nurturers, and that's why women are so successful, because they nurture, and you know what happens when you nurture, right? The kind of
Yes.
results. But
Yes. Yeah.
you find that with women also. I mean, I know that this is not a religious program or anything like that. However, women find themselves, like on a Sunday, for example, in church, where they get a lot of solid teachings about
Mhm.
God being with you, and no weapons formed against you will prosper. And these things sink in.
Yeah.
And I think it helps to sort of fortify
Hmm.
the woman. Men, well, just go and have a drink, man. Let her go on to church. Go and worship. Pray for me as well.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah,
worship
yeah,
in a different way. He
yeah,
Yes.
following a
You know,
different
and
spirit,
I think that
Ainsley.
the resilience that you can develop by virtue of being connected
yeah.
spiritually,
Your community, yeah.
Yeah,
and having a community that can reinforce you, that in itself is very, very important. And I think that that's where a lot of men fall down, and the
yeah,
women.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Anthony, jump in
Yeah,
here.
I agree with you totally, and it's something I think that you said, going back to your earlier question, what are some of the solutions? I think
Yes.
one of the things why women succeed is that they stay connected
Yeah.
more than men, and I
Mhm.
think it's one of the things that we were really pushing in terms of mental health, in terms of staying connected. Some research have been done in places like Africa and stuff on people who were on antipsychotic medication, and what they have done is that they found that people who were taking antipsychotic medication and also attending a church meeting, a prayer group, whereby they stay connected with each other, they found that their mental health was far better because they were staying connected. Why? Because they were not lonely. And it's something that we will, I mean, we talk about the pandemic and stuff, but it's something we will probably face with a bigger challenge, is loneliness, because
Oh,
we haven't got
yes.
a pill for that. We haven't
Yep.
got a pill for that. The only solution to that is actually staying connected
Yeah.
with
Or,
each
or
other.
there isn't I tell people there isn't a pill for sorting out a bad relationship.
Yeah.
You just have to work on it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
just
So
have to work on it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that whole thing about staying connected, I think it's one of the simple things that we can do. And whether that be virtually or face to face, it's
Yeah.
about staying connected with each
Mhm.
other. And certainly that has been one of the things that helped people through that pandemic,
Yeah.
staying
Yeah.
connected, reaching out to each other. And
Yeah.
and also the act of giving. I think people don't realize how powerful that is. Giving, just giving to someone. You
Hmm.
found a lot of that kindness emerging also.
Yeah.
People
Hmm.
realize that, and this is about coming back to the post-traumatic growth again. People realize that we need each other in the
Yeah.
pandemic and to stay connected to each other. So these are some of the simple things that we
Hmm.
can do actually that could make a big difference.
Let me ask
But
something.
then
Go ahead,
can I?
Marcia.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
But haven't we told men that they need to figure it out? That's one of the big narratives that we've handed to them. You know,
Yeah.
you have an issue, you just need to sort it out. You need to sort you need to man up and just sort yourself out. Pull
Yeah.
yourself up
Yeah.
by your bootstraps
That
and
that
get on
is
with it.
that has created a lot of problems for men, because you see, with that kind of mindset, you now think that your job in a relationship is just to fix the woman,
Mm.
fix her.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, that you're the fixer,
Of course.
so you
Yes.
just fix her.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
bother to listen and be empathetic
Mm.
and try and
Yeah.
understand what she's trying to get across to
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
That's, that's not manly. What
Yes.
you need to do is to fix her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
has gotten us into a lot of trouble.
So
So here's my
you
question.
might proper fix her by dropping a slap, $2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
$2. Yeah.
I have a
And
question
sort it
here.
out.
I have a question here. Let me see. What about the questionable advice they often get from their peers?
Mm.
True.
Mm.
Who wants to take that? Ainsley, I'm
Give
calling
them
on
some
you, the man, one of the men.
give them some psychotherapy, and steer them away from their peers, because the peers is having a negative effect on them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Any
they need
addition
to
to that? Yeah.
understand too, they need to be able to decipher when, you know, okay, so yes, you need your cheerleaders, you need your support, you need the yeah man crew. Yeah man,
Yeah,
yeah
man,
man,
crew.
Mm.
you need a yeah man crew. But at the end of the day, you need friends who are able to look you straight in the eye and say, look,
The truth.
you're nonsense, you need to sort
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think you could do
Recognize it.
better. Yeah.
And they say,
Mhm.
show me your company and I'll show you, or I'll
Should
tell you who you
Yeah.
are.
You
who you
are.
are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
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 So let me ask a question to the men here now in terms of that. What could we as women do to help our men? What would you like from us? Anthony.
That's a very interesting question, actually. Very, very interesting
That's why
question.
I asked Anthony. I'm the host. I'm asking. I want to
And
know so I could be there for the men.
yeah, what can
I don't
we
know if other
oh,
women are asking that, but I'm
yeah.
asking, and I'm not only asking here.
I don't know if you all would be able to do anything. I think you all might be able to support us more in
Mm-hmm.
terms of us sort of coming to a realization, coming to a better sense of awareness in an understanding of self,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of when we are not getting it wrong. And Ainsley talked about that whole thing of fixers. We have been trained and
Mm-hmm.
been nurtured that way as to take on various roles. We are the hunters, we are the providers, we are the
Mm-hmm.
fixers. I think society is changing and has changed a lot in terms of roles of men.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at roles of men. I think in terms of how to support us, it's about supporting us, helping us come to a better understanding of selves, because we need help with that. Let's not play man, as they say. We do need help with that, actually, and that has started from childhood, mother,
Mm-hmm.
parenting, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
That's how we have been educated, and I think sometimes we we miss that, and that's lost, and that stop happening when you reach a certain age, because you need to man up, as Marcia correctly said. But
Yes.
sometimes we still do need that nurturing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
Ainsley,
Mm.
help.
Ainsley, what would you add to that as
Well,
the next man on the panel?
given the restraints on time, I think some men go around with the feeling that, or with the notion that, and I've heard a man actually say that, I don't get headaches, I give them. And if we can get out of that mindset and understand that we're fixers in a sense, but not in the sense that we're thinking for the woman. But we should put ourselves up there as men who stand up to fix situations along with our spouses and whomever. But it can't be a situation where I don't get headaches. I just give them.
Wow. That's deep, Ainsley. Marcia, say something.
Well, I was looking at some of the comments here, and I'm looking at what Christoph is saying. And Christoph is saying, be yourself and not behave as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And Christoph has a point there. When a man and a woman come together in a relationship, you're not signing off. You're not coming in to replace the mother, or you're not coming in to do mothering. You're coming in as an equal, as an adult, to be able to complement each other. And yes, I have heard men complain. In fact, I remember speaking to a couple who got divorced and their son had mental health issues.
Wow.
And the father said one of the reasons why he couldn't stay in the relationship was because she treated him as a child, as her child.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't need mothering. I mean, he had a very traumatic experience of mothering. So I could understand why he would reject that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the things that he said. I don't need my wife to be my mother. I need a wife. I don't need a mother.
Yeah. Wow.
So when you're scolding and when you feel you can talk to me, talk down to me, that's not acceptable.
Yeah. This whole thing about mental health, we have gone from, I don't know which angle we took it, and we went all over the place with it till it reached leadership, all sorts of things, It is such a complex, intricate, you can't dissect it. You can't say, okay, take this part, and if you fix it, everything will be resolved. It is so intricate. It is so hidden. It is masked. It is so many things. And I'm like, I want you guys in closing to give, we're almost mid-year. We're in May. Imagine that. We're almost mid-year 2022. And I want people to have something to move forward with from this session. If there is one tip each one of you could give, I'm going to start with Ainsley. Mm-hmm. One tip in moving forward that you can share with persons. It don't matter what the audience.
Yes, I would go back to what I said earlier on. Mm-hmm. That we need to nurture our employees coming from the standpoint of the workplace, because it is only through nurturing that you will ultimately become productive. Mm-hmm. The big stick thing.
Not working.
You can force people to work. You can hold a gun at somebody's head and say work. Mm-hmm. But that's not it. We really need to nurture so that we can get people motivated, engaged, satisfied with their jobs, and productive.
Awesome. Anthony?
I would follow that on with what I said earlier on also, with the compassionate leadership. Mm-hmm. When looking after your employees, and sometimes it's not about being in charge, but be taking charge of the people in your care. If I could turn that around, sometimes that's what it is about, taking charge of the people in your care and your employees are in your care. I'll also touch on the whole thing of that post-traumatic growth, that sometimes it's good to reflect a bit and to think deeply in terms of, well, yes, all this has happened, but could we identify and recognize the good things and some of the things that has sort of helped us to develop, to grow, some of the changes that have taken place, the positive changes.
Awesome. Marcia?
Yeah. Well, I'll make a plug for the child mental health. And one of the things that parents need to do is to help build resilience in their children. Teach your child how to recognize, what are healthy relationships. Teach them how to be able to express how they're feeling, and to be able to name their emotions. You know, teach them that asking for help is okay. You know, it's
Very
fine.
okay.
Yeah, it's fine if you ask for help.
Particularly
You
the
know,
boys. Isn't
yes,
it?
particularly boys. You know, come out and ask for help. You know, especially in the school environment, the boys who are noticed are the ones who are acting out their distress, and the ones who you have to put on suspension and exclusion and things like
Yeah.
that. But we want them to be able to express how they feel. You know, we want to be able to help them to have more healthy coping mechanisms.
Without judgment, Marcia. Without judgment.
Sorry.
Without judgment. Yes. Yeah.
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 You know, and developing healthy coping mechanisms, learning when you need to just step away from a situation, you know, take some deep breaths, you know, engage in some grounding techniques, you know, listening to music.
Self-care.
Yes, self-care, go for
Self-care.
a walk, do
Yeah.
something, you
Yeah.
know. But I think there's also a duty of care, because these children had have not had the best 2 years of their lives in the
Yeah.
last 2 years. And the authorities really need to focus in on helping these children to manage their mental health well. You know, they have to be able to boost the support offered to children. They need to shore up the capacity of faith-based organizations, NGOs that provide early intervention, like police youth clubs, to children who, you know, who might be missing something. But once they're able to find that community that would be able to support them, those organizations need to be shown up. And teachers as well need to be helped to recognize when difficult behavior is more trauma driven than anything else.
And
You know,
deviant behavior. Just
yes,
acting out.
it's not
Yes.
deviant behavior, it's trauma-driven
It's
behavior.
trauma
And we need
driven.
to, and educators need to be able to recognize and understand that. So
Wow.
that's it for me in a summary. I mean, there's a load of things we could talk about, but yeah.
I know. But we're just touching here. And we may resume this at another time. Once all my people here are available, we can have another session and go into some more deeper issues and probably pull it out some more. Yeah. But I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here with me, for recognizing mental health awareness. This may be nothing compared to, what could be done, but at least it brings awareness. And what I wanted to do was for persons to be aware of the services that each one of you offer. Dr. Deer in Jamaica, Marcia here in Trinidad, and Anthony in the UK. And as I mentioned, their information is in the description. I was supposed to show it here as well, but we're running out of time. All their information is in the description. You can personally reach out to them one-on-one. Of course, if you're having any difficulty, please feel free to reach out to me. And to all the persons who were listening and watching, I thank you for supporting and being here, liking, put in your comments. I know you probably were scared to ask certain questions. It's very a touchy topic, but that's okay. We're taking time and massaging you in. We may come back again and allow you to be able to ask your questions, and you may feel more free to do so. Let's hope that from today onwards, people, that there is a change. As little as it may be, we're inching towards a better and improved life. Thank you so much for being here on Between the Lines. I do appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.